You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
We're going to go to Illinois now, where the governor has signed a new criminal justice reform bill that will eliminate the cash bail system by 2023, making the state the first ever to abolish the discriminatory practice in the country. Now, this new law, which was pushed by the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, also mandates that every police officer in the state wear a body camera by 2025. So joining me now to discuss this further is Kim Foxx, Cook County State's attorney. Kim, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Now, this cash bill, we know it disproportionately impacts minorities and the lower class. So instead of having suspects post money to be freed from jail, judges will use a risk assessment to determine whether a suspect should be released or not. So can you just walk us through, if you're familiar with what that risk assessment system could possibly look like?
So we have a version of that here in Cook County, which encompasses Chicago, where our pretrial services will look at the defendant's background, any prior convictions, any prior warrants that he had not shown up or she has not shown up to court as. Is this person working, going to school? Who is the totality of who they are? And based on their risk, then they will be released without condition. Or if they have an elevated risk, there may be some additional conditions that they have to meet, like meeting with a pretrial officer more regularly, maybe some type of preventative treatment. But in essence, it is not a determination just based on how much money you can post to get out of jail. So it's geared to be a more holistic approach of looking at defendants and not the overly simplified approach of assessing a monetary value.
Now, in your opinion, why do you believe that the governor made this move to eliminate cash bail now?
You know, the governor made a commitment last year that he was going to look at eliminating cash bail. There was a groundswell of support for this by activists and advocates for years. The In Money Bond Coalition has been pushing for this. My office, the state's attorney's office, have been pushing for this. And in the wake of what happened with George Floyd and the fact that, you know, we have people like Kyle Rittenhouse, who is an exemplification of what's wrong with the cash bail system. Here's a boy who crosses the border with the long arm, shoots and kills two people, and is walking the streets today because someone was able to pay his bail, while at the same time there are people in jails across the country, across this state, who were charged with nonviolent offenses and can't post something as little as $500 to get out. And so I think the governor, recognizing those forces at play and really having a true commitment to justice, said, if not now, then when? And the Legislative Black Caucus should be applauded for saying that now is the time.
So it's going to take about 2 years before this is implemented. And also in the bill, the governor is saying that police are mandated to wear their body cameras, but that won't happen until about 2025. So we're in 2021. Why is it going to take so long for that to be a thing?
You know, in Chicago, which is our largest police department in the state, they already have body cameras, but Illinois is a vast state. It's pretty rural. And so I think the legislation was recognizing that there are some portions of the state that accessibility and the funding for police cameras may be more difficult than some of our larger municipalities. And so I think there was enough runway in there so that we can make sure that people have the equipment, can afford the equipment, are trained on the equipment, and the equipment is up. But here in Chicago and Cook County, they have a body camera. And this legislation also is not even just having body camera, that there are penalties attached when you don't turn it on. There are assumptions that are made when people who are wearing body cameras aren't turning them on in instances of police accountability or misconduct.
So what are the consequences if an officer weren't to turn on their body camera?
one of the things that they could be subject to is prosecution, to a felony prosecution, if it is determined that their camera was not turned on because they did not want to show what was happening in that instance. And so the penalties are pretty swift or stiff, which is why we saw so much opposition from law enforcement groups.
So, as you're saying, yes, there's a lot of opposition that's coming from law enforcement. There's a lot of opposition that's coming from lawmakers, and they're basically saying that this bill will hurt law enforcement and it will force officers to essentially leave the force. They're saying it's just not fair to officers to have to do these things. What do you say to that?
I say that's absolutely ridiculous. It's fear-mongering. One of the things that has been heartening about this is the collective effort from community organizers, legislators, and the governor to put this bill on the governor's desk. What has been disheartening is the fear-mongering, oftentimes soaked in racial tropes, that has happened from some of those who've opposed this. This is about simple police accountability. These are things that should be common sense, that you don't turn off your body-worn camera when you have one assigned to you, that you don't use chokeholds, that you don't charge people with resisting arrest when there's no underlying offense. These are not things that are meant to undermine the credibility of law enforcement. In fact, it's supposed to bolster it. Because if people don't have faith and trust in the credibility of our institutions, then they will resort to street justice. That's when we are less safe. When people don't trust the system, we are less safe. This is built to have credibility rebuilt into that system. And
as you know, a lot of minority communities just don't trust law enforcement, and they do have good reason for that. Now, we know that in Washington, D.C., New York, and New Jersey, they've adopted some form of cash bail and kind of like eliminating it or limiting its use in these regions. But do you think that this is something that other states are going to follow suit with?
We certainly followed the New Jersey model, and the time that we're putting into it in eliminating cash bail starts in 2023. The time that we're putting into it now, making sure that we have the resources available to these folks who will no longer be detained pre-trial to make sure that their needs are met and the community safety is met, is something that I'm really confident about. But we're looking at the New Jersey model. Things that have worked in New York or didn't work, or in places like California, are things that we're very mindful of. And I'm very confident, based on those lessons learned, that we have a very strong bill here.
All right, Kim, I'm going to open this up to my panel members, Scott, Monique, or Robert. If you guys have a question for Kim, go ahead and ask her.
Certainly. Kim, this is Attorney Patillo. I did have this question. So I'm on the executive board for the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and we've seen in some jurisdictions that have eliminated cash bond that we've seen many abuses of the risk assessment system, where it's skewed towards individuals. Some of the questions you asked during the risk assessment, what are your ties to the community? Do you have a job? Do you own property? Do you have the resources to abscond? Those sorts of things kind of skew towards people who are more economically advantageous and often who are not part of the African-American community. What safeguards are in place to prevent abuse of risk assessments in a similar way that abuses have been made of the cash bond system?
Yeah, I think one of the things is we've recognized that there's some inherent biases in these risk assessment tools that we've been able to see as these tools have been rolled out over the past several years. Here in Cook County, since 2017, we've been using the risk assessment tool and have shrunk our jail population by about 40% from 2015 to last year. And so it is tweaking that. It is making sure that we know that, jobs or access to employment may be very different on different parts of the city, and that should not weigh more than other factors. And so we're looking at the tool we have. We've been able to tweak it and see its utilization now. And again, in the course of the next couple of years, making sure that we have a tool that's right-sized. It's not perfect. Algorithms and science are no not the be-all, end-all answer, but it is one piece of this, and judges having the discretion to be able to probe, I think, is one of the things that will be different than where we've seen it in the past.
Scott.
Yeah, Kim, this is Scott Bolden, proudly born in Joliet, Illinois, if you will.
Yeah.
And my dad's a retired judge in Will County, and I get back to see him, so always been a big fan of yours. And my question is about judges, right? what have the judges been saying, or what's been their response to this legislation? Because while I have not looked deeply at the legislation, it would suggest that you're taking some of their discretion and authority away, or is that not the case?
I mean, I think what we're taking away is the one tool that judges have heavily relied upon, which is assigning a monetary value and not necessarily evaluating risk. Judges here in Cook County, for example, have been using this modified risk assessment tool since 2017, and we've seen an increase of people who've been released on recognizance bonds, signature bonds, because they recognize that not every defendant is the same. And so some of the feedback that we've gotten from people who've actually used the tool, who've been doing this, has been positive. We've not seen an uptick in crime as we've done bail reform in Cook County. They've been able to counter that narrative. But this does, the risk assessment tool is just one piece. The judge's discretion, a judge will have to make a finding on the record if he's going to hold someone in custody without bond. You don't get to just make these decisions and not have to explain yourself. And so I think that affords them that ability.
Yeah. Thank you.
Monique?
Ma'am, I'm a fan. So I'm fanning out a little bit. I just want to say first, before I ask my question, wow, how ever proud I am of you and are so many just Black and brown girls in America, especially those of us who come through the halls of law school and look at the way that you have stood up for your people, how you have done your job, how whether it has been feast or famine, whether it's been hot or cold through fire, you have stayed true to your principles. I applaud you. I am rooting for you. Many of us are rooting for you. So my question is, what is it that people can do, whether it's your constituency or whether it's kind of the broader constituency of all of those who are rooting from afar, that can make your job and the job of prosecutors in your position easier or at least less hard to do when you really are on some uphill battles pulling down all of these old ways and systems of doing things?
Yeah, thank you for that. And, it's a mutual admiration society. I think it's what you do, Monique. There's so much misinformation that is put out about justice reform. There are people who are entrenched to the old way of doing things, where incarceration and not dealing with root causes of violence, with being overly punitive, engaging in wars on drugs or wars, on violence in our communities has just been completely disrupted. I think what we need for people, particularly in the Black community, is to know that they have a stake in this. I'm only in this seat. I won re-election because Black people showed up at the ballot box and said, we don't want to go back, that we believe in restorative justice, that we believe that the criminal justice system is overly punitive. We understand what mass incarceration means, and we're not going to fall for this. And so what has been incredibly helpful to me in some of the noise that has come, because I've been attacked, the Fraternal Order of Police, I'm public enemy number one. The former president, the former attorney general, called me out. It is the engagement of our communities on justice issues, not just in the wake of somebody's death. We rally, very, very hard in the wake of tragedy, but this has to be a sustained commitment to making sure that we have prosecutors and defense attorneys and judges who are aligned with our values. And for so long, we've just given up on prosecutors because we haven't seen ourselves in these roles. We need more, Black prosecutors, and not just Black, but those who come from the communities that are impacted by our choices. That's how we can help. We have to keep a sustained energy and effort around justice issues and local stakeholders in the race.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.